Welcome to the Women at Halftime podcast, where we dive into the ideas, the strategies, and conversations that help you move forward in life and business, especially at mid-career at the halftime of life. So today we are exploring a topic that affects all of us, change. Whether it's in our careers, our relationships, or personal growth, navigating change can be challenging. But what if we approached it like an improv scene? Well, I'm thrilled to have Kat Koppett with us today. Kat is an expert in applied improvisation, where she helps individuals and organizations harness the power of improv to think on their feet, adapt, and thrive in uncertain situations. And you'll walk away with some insights and practical tools to apply in both business and in everyday life. So get ready for an engaging conversation that just might change the way you think about change. This podcast is brought to you by DJ Works Media and HalftimeSuccess.com, offering resources and insights for those at mid-career or the halftime of life. Explore our diverse categories, including courses, coaching, health, music, software, and travel. We're here to help you make this stage of life your best ever. So get our new articles, downloads, and podcasts by signing up for weekly updates at goalsforyourlife.com/newsletter. Now, let's dive into today's episode. Well, hello, everyone. So happy to have you here with us, Kat. Thanks for joining us.
I'm so glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
And I love the topic today. I mean, it is a fun topic. And as we just shared a tiny bit before signing on here is, I've taken a couple improv classes, but I never felt totally proficient at it, and I've directed my own, I've actually not directed, I've produced my original musicals, but there's just a wonderful field of drama, of that whole improv and how you have applied it to business as well. So I love my guests to introduce more about themselves. I'll remind everyone that I do put out an article every week, not always on every single podcast, but make sure you're getting those goalsforyourlife.com/newsletter, and you don't miss any of the podcasts as well. So, because I put bonuses in. So, Kat, why don't you give us a background? Because you have this drama background and you have an organizational psychology background.
Yeah.
My goodness. Okay. So give us a little bit of that background of where you came from and why you are so passionate about improv.
Yeah. It was very improvisational. It surprised me as well. I started out as an actor, and my undergraduate degrees in theater. I went to conservatory in New York City, and loved it. I was a very serious, sort of classically trained actor, and improv back in those days was very separate from scripted theater. Not so much anymore, but I kept getting these notes, comments from my acting teachers that were something like, you think too much. Or one person said, you're too smart to be an actor, which of course is a ridiculous thing to say, right? Some of the most brilliant people in the world. And it was only after I left school that I started to sort of try to I couldn't understand what they were saying. It was not a helpful note. Not good teaching. But luckily for me, I was part of a theater company, and an improviser, a woman named Terry Summer, came by and gave a masterclass for us. And she unpacked for me in this very first introduction to improv what my teachers were trying to tell me, but couldn't figure out how to move me toward, which is really a way of accessing my spontaneity, trusting my impulses, being really present in the moment, and accepting and building with what's really happening, as opposed to trying to plan it or intellectualize it too much ahead of time. And so that's how I became an improviser. And my day job was teaching English as a second language to Soviet refugees. Yeah. And through that job, I became a teacher, trainer, and a supervisor. And in my improv company, my students started saying to us, oh, it would be great if my boss could support us the way we're supported in improv, or if my team knew these improv principles for co-creation. Come teach us. And because I had this teacher training job over here, my improv company said, you should do the corporate training stuff. So I was pulled into it. I kind of was like, with my still sort of smart intellectual brain, I was like, okay, I don't know, improv and organizations. So I went back and I got a master's in organizational psychology so that I could test and see if I was selling snake oil, was really the reason.
Wow. Interesting.
Yeah. I wanted to, I felt like there are a lot of people who know a lot about organizational development and learning, and I shouldn't just pretend I know that because I have this product.
Yeah.
And, the short version, I'm always learning from my clients about how it applies, but it took about a month in graduate school to realize that actors and artists and improvisers had something that a lot of other people were starving for.
Mm.
And then my clients keep continuing to teach me how applicable it really is.
Isn't that something? How we learn from those that we work with.
Yeah.
It's really, really amazing. It's such a great mindset, actually, is what it is, too, because you can't be closed off to that, like, oh, you know everything. This is such a great principle, too. I find there's a lot of our younger generation, now that I have, sons that are adult sons and their friends, and there's a lot of, especially women, that feel things like have to be perfect or have to be a certain way. Just, because now this is supposed to be, the way you raise children. This is the way you keep your homes. This is the way I'm supposed to look. This is what, and that's very damaging in many ways.
Yeah.
Because you get so locked into that you can't just be a person. You can't kind of just let down. And when you're saying, oh, there's a certain amount of structure to this, but you have to be able to be flexible enough to be able to meet different situations and not say, oh, it has to be this way. It has to be this schedule, has to be that. I mean, that drives people crazy.
Yeah.
Everybody around you crazy.
Yeah. And yourself. I mean, I think you said a lot of different things in there, all of which feel really important. One is that we get trained that excellence, let alone
Yes.
perfection,
Right.
looks in a certain way. And that if you plan enough or you try hard enough or you're good enough, you'll be able to do it this one way, or you'll be able to control everything. And
Right.
if the last 5 years of global events have taught us anything, it should be that we do not know what is coming next.
No.
We cannot plan for the future. And everything changes. We did a lot of work right at the beginning of COVID with global consultants around the world whose job it was to go in and have answers, right? And, call on CEOs and help them, guide them on their companies. And they were like, we don't have answers. We don't, these are the most experienced expert people in the world. Like, there are no answers.
Yeah.
We have to improvise. We have to be flexible and resilient and figure it out. And that's true. Can you hear my dog?
Yeah. That's so cute.
Give me 1 second and I will let him
That's
in.
okay. It's so funny, though, because when we were talking right before, if you're on the video, you'll see her now sitting her dog. I have to put my dog in my house because she will be doing the same thing, because she'll see like a squirrel and it'll be all over. She's a hunter. But it was so funny.
Improv. Well,
yeah, improv.
I could have just ignored that.
Yes.
Right? And in my head, I'm going like, oh no, this is unprofessional. I'm not perfect. My dog is interrupting us. Or I can go, okay, my dog is barking. That just exists. I don't have to like it, but there it is. And then we accept and build with it.
Yes. And that's such a great principle. In fact, I have an illustration. I was just recording a podcast yesterday with my husband. We're on together once a month. I bring him on, and because this is for women as well, just for men as well.
Yeah.
And so we were talking about commoditization, and he has a big business background, and so. But man, halfway through there, I was feeling like I gotta sneeze. I gotta blow my nose. I'm like, no sniffing. I should have paused and just taken care of it. And then, so, and my husband's comment to me was afterwards, why do you keep sniffing? But it was something that sometimes we're unwilling to say, oh no, I just need to keep going. Oh no, I need to keep, so that was a very good point that sometimes it's okay. It doesn't have to be just exactly perfect. We can move on. So that's a really great life principle, actually.
Well, because you're just out of sync with reality if you're not
Yes.
willing, right? There's that very that viral video of the gentleman who was doing an interview, I think with the BBC, and his kids came in,
Yeah.
and then his wife was like, and he's just sitting on the screen like this. This is pre-COVID, right? Like, I'm just totally frozen. Whereas if he'd just been like, oh, excuse me, these are my
Yeah,
children.
these are my,
we would
yeah.
be delighted. We know that now our pets are all over the place.
Right. Isn't that funny?
You mentioned parenting, and I think it's the same thing, right? Like we could read I know this was true of me with my daughter. Like I could read all the books in the world. I could have all the plans in the world, but now I'm in this little improvisational scene with this person and what she needs and what she responds to and how I support her has to be with what's actually happening in the moment, not some idea of something that's perfect.
And if you're not open to that, you have misplaced priorities. It's totally misplaced. And you don't even realize it because you're going by the book. You're going by everything that you're supposed to be doing, but it's misplaced. There's other more important things. And I always say too, even with raising kids, because we raised 3 sons, I thought, it's very important. It's very intense during all of this time. But I wanted to keep my marriage together because I want a lifetime, partner after those kids are out of the house.
Yeah.
And I don't want to ignore at least that relation. And I don't know. I mean, I'm not being critical of anybody that has had issues with that. But that was a priority of mine. And thinking if I could have totally misplaced my priorities, and we would have never had what we have even now, which is, it's amazing how you get on the other end of that. So yeah, but that's the same thing. You get that misplaced priorities. So
yeah.
You talk about, and this is the term I really want you to define for us, this applied improvisation. It's not just improvisation, improv.
Yeah.
It's applied. So explain that for us.
So we've already started to talk about it, right? So improvisation, when most people think about it, they think about improv comedy on a stage or on television, like whose line is it anyway? And the applied improvisation field, which is a newer term in the world, right? So originally I was doing this, I wrote a book on it. They wouldn't even let me put improv in the title. But now there is a whole global field, which is just taking those principles and philosophies, ideas, exercises from the world of improvisational theater and applying them off the stage to whatever scene we're finding ourselves in. So a podcast conversation or hard giving feedback at work or leading a team or being a physician, and managing, all sorts of environments.
And I think that's it's such an important principle. And as we spoke before, real quick too, and where the conversation leads, it's also easy as one who does improv. This happens to me all the time. I'll end up going down rabbit trails, and then okay, got to get back on topic when you're talking about a subject. So you have to be careful with that in some areas. But the principle and being flexible, I think there are such principles, and we're going to talk about some of those principles to actually apply to life that I think people will be able to walk away with, which will be really, really helpful. So let's get into that just a little bit. For the applied improvisation, then, is for us to be able to take those principles really and apply them toward our businesses, to our lives, that it's not just this separate field anymore. There are definite principles out of it, which are really very, very good in responding, in being able to be, flexible in the moment.
Yeah.
Those are principles that, boy, you need at all stages of life. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Even when you're letting your little cute dog in. So, yes.
He is not behaving today. You know, he gets some sleep. I don't know
But he's
what
not barking. That's good.
He's like, I'm going to test you as an
Yes.
improviser.
Yeah. Well, my little dog would have, she'd be wanting in my lap too. So there's, that's why she's in the house. So how can improv help us just kind of outside that performance sort of setting and feeling? Because when we think about performance, all of a sudden there's this different persona sometimes that we put on. So when we are at work, when we're leading a team, when we're, in those sort of different situations, we're working with our colleagues. Give us some of those clues.
Sure. So I said a few minutes ago that my clients keep teaching me about the application of improv. And one of my early clients, a hospital, I went in coming out of grad school and I was like, here's all the jargon and all the lingo. And I was explaining how improv could be because of this and that. And they listened very politely. And then they said, what about the fact that we're just, as human beings, we're just improvising all the time? And I was like, oh, right. It's really as simple as that. Like, I don't know all my high, jargon. It's not a metaphor, right?
Yes.
We're improvising this conversation right now.
Right.
Now, to unpack that, if we're at our best, we're really improvising with these principles. Often we can get into scripted, as you were saying, sort of, I have to do it this way, which gets us out of touch with things. So working both ends towards the middle. One of the ways improv helps us is it just helps us recognize that we can, in any given moment, expand our awareness of what's happening and what's needed and what we want, what our objectives are, and also help us expand our range of options. So I have this unconscious habitual way of showing up. Is that helping me? Is it getting what I want? Like, as you said, with a parent, right? Am I doing what I think I'm supposed to be doing as a parent, going by the script? Or am I paying attention and accepting and building with what's necessary? So, it's not a metaphor. I have a colleague who says, performance improv is really just applying improv principles to the stage. It's really all one thing.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to bring something up called fear right now.
Yeah.
Because I've done a lot of work in the entertainment. I did headline shows that were very scripted.
Yeah.
There's a certain amount of fear when you get off script.
Yeah.
What's going to come out of my mouth?
Yeah.
Am I going to be able to stay on, or think on my feet? The same thing happens in life. It can happen in business. There's a certain amount of fear of thinking, well, no, what did that book say? Or no, what was that principle I'm supposed to apply? There's a certain amount of that right now, because I think a little bit is that, you have a lot of these influencers. I have nothing against those influencers, because a lot of them are wonderful people. But when you end up following, this sort of expert, and then all of a sudden you're off that just a little bit. It just feels different. It feels like, okay, got to take that deep breath. There's a certain amount of that fear.
Yeah.
How do you approach that, not only on your end of helping people through that, but on the recipient, how we are supposed to handle the fear of going off script?
Yeah.
Whew, that's a loaded question, by the way.
Rich, deep question.
It is a loaded question.
So the good news is, feeling uncomfortable is something we can build a tolerance for.
Yes.
Whether you have a script or not, stage fright, right? Getting up in front of people, whether it's a formal stage or just speaking at a meeting, or talking to your in-laws, like whatever it is.
Yes.
That's a real fear, right?
Yes. Mhm.
And there's some studies that show people fear public speaking more than they fear
Yes.
death.
Yes.
I hope that's because people think it's more imminent in any given moment. Like if they actually had to choose, I hope they choose public speaking. But so one of the muscles you can exercise is getting comfortable with discomfort.
Mhm.
In improv, we talk about going into the cave or embracing failure, just
Mhm.
exercising the muscle of,
Mhm.
oh, this feels less in control, or this feels more uncomfortable, or I don't know what's happening. And then going, wee, and that, just getting comfortable with that. Another muscle that we exercise in improv is accessing our spontaneity. So
Mhm.
my first teacher that I just mentioned, Terry Summer, used to say, if you can't think of anything to say, it's usually because you're censoring what you've thought of.
Ooh.
Isn't that good? So
Yes.
we have all so much judgment going on inside our heads that sometimes we can't even hear ourselves
Mm.
what our authentic thought or feeling is. And so one of the muscles we exercise in improv is this muscle of spontaneity, just
Yes.
blurting without judgment.
Hmm.
Now, I want to be clear when I say this. In the world, I'm not saying discernment or judgment or self-control are bad qualities. They're not.
Yes.
They're good.
Right. Right.
It's just that for a lot of us, that muscle is more exercised than our ability to access our sort of authentic thoughts and feelings and impulses. So we exercise that. And so those are two places to start: being comfortable
Mm.
with fear, celebrating risk taking, embracing failure. Sometimes we even say celebrating failure. And then exercising the muscle of blurting. I guess there's one more that I would add, which is um,
Mm.
one of the principles in improv is focus on your partner, not yourself.
Oh, yes. Mm.
And so if I'm leading my team or taking care of my child or giving a big speech, if I can focus on the audience, if I can focus on you and how do I give you the gift of what I have to share? How do I make you feel comfortable, or how do I delight you?
Mhm.
Then I'm much less likely to be caught in my head spinning with negative self-talk about how do I look? Am I doing this okay?
Yeah.
Actually in service.
That's so great. I like when you say exercising muscles immediately that I thought I've started this year adding in to my exercise routine some yoga. And I work out early in the morning. So I access my iFit apps and everything. So I'm
Yeah.
doing that. I'm very unflexible, by the way. And so just not flexible. I've never been flexible, never been able to touch my toes. I'm sure I'll have a lot of listeners go, oh, I can help you. No, I've tried for years. But I tell you, the more you do it with the breathing and everything, it's like I had no idea how it builds upon it. It starts building a little bit,
Beautiful.
and I'm not good at it at all. My balance, I'm working on that because the older we get, we got to work on that balance. You got to work on the breath control, all of that, but it builds. And I immediately thought of that because in my life, at least, it's a real life illustration of building up that resilience because you've got to put that risk. I talk about risk all the time, because why have I done a couple dozen albums and written musicals and it's a lot of risk happening there. It's
Yeah.
not like a
The
huge,
riskiest, right?
yeah, it's a huge risk business. And so I'm not risk averse, but it's a built up thinking I've now in my taking risks, I'm a little more strategic, but I've had years of this. So it's good to exercise those muscles. I loved your principles of, just to celebrating those failures. We learn from every single failure, every single one. There's something that we can walk away with and not beating ourselves up. And then you build on it. There's a lot of books on that, especially Failing Fast. All of those I've read them all.
And,
but they're,
no, I think you're right. There are lots of books on it. And 20 years ago, when this applied improv field started, 25 years ago to really take off, there weren't.
Yes.
So a lot of these principles that we talk about, accepting and building, celebrating failure, right? The superpower of listening are so much in the zeitgeist right now that it's hard to even claim them as applied improv principles.
Yeah.
I love that you pulled on the exercising muscles metaphor, because I think that's in some ways what continues to differentiate applied improv is it's really a set of exercises to work those muscles as opposed to just mindsets or knowledge to think about. And just to add that when you start to think about it that way, it can make that idea of being comfortable being uncomfortable make more sense, right? You wouldn't go to a yoga class and go like, oh no, this feels uncomfortable. I'm doing something wrong. You'd be like, oh, I'm getting a workout, right? If you go to the gym and you sweat, you're like, yeah, I'm getting a workout. I might not even like how it feels, but no, that's the point. If I went and I was like, la, 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 oh, this is easy, then you'd be like wasting my time.
Right. Such a great illustration. And this applies to so many areas. I mean, I just came off of some of the Grammy events. And so it's, when I'm keeping my chops up with my, my piano, concert piano chops, which, I'm not working as much in the music anymore. I still do some work for Disney and all of that. But when I go sit down at the piano, I haven't played in a while, I am doing exercises right off. I am doing 4-octave scales, doing the rhythms. I'm doing all it's the exercises, and we get back to that, and exercising those muscles, it makes us more comfortable. What it does is it doesn't just make us more comfortable. It adds like a resilience. When you have to do a long period of time of something, you're going to have more strength, right? It's just building up that strength. And those principles were exactly, this is a wonderful improv conversation, by the way. I'm just really enjoying it.
Me too.
It's so good.
It's so, and as a musician, right? As a musician and a composer, you're doing this all the time, right? Like we're using the process as our product when we're improvising on stage, but your process, I'm sure, is employing all of these things. I love what you just said about we build the strength and the resilience. So it's so that when you need it, so when the world shuts down with COVID or when you get a rejection, when you wanted acceptance, right? You have those. That's not when you start applying these principles. You have the strength. Right. So that
you get the stamina. You've got the stamina. You're able to hold up. Definitely. You're not going to just collapse. And there's so many great principles in this. So we've really talked about how improv is more useful than ever now. I think we've really touched on a lot of those areas because it really, if people are listening here, hopefully you're listening to a lot of these, remember, they'll be in the show notes, by the way, and, you'll be able to get all the transcript there from, AI will give you the full transcript. So that's all you have to do is press a button these days. But it will develop that stamina. Just be encouraged getting beyond that fear. I think that's because improv feels fearful to many because they think it's public speaking. I have to stand in front and now I have to be on my feet. I'm not good at that. It's responding. It's listening. It's responding. And sometimes those responses are just the very best. It's an expression of the face. But that's life too. It's an expression how you respond to people. I had a phone call this morning and I left that phone call. It was all about our gate that wasn't closing. And I needed a new sensor. And I left that conversation with, this is the nicest man. He is so generous. That's how I want people to, I don't want people, have that sort of, even over, so that's that sort of response.
Yeah.
Whether we're in business, in life, it just softens relationships as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it.
There are two improv skills or principles in there. One is the paying attention and listening and receiving, right?
Yes.
And
Right.
the most brilliant improvisers in the world are not the ones who are the most clever or the funniest or the quickest, but who are the best at receiving and noticing.
Yeah.
Right? So that's the another muscle you can exercise is how do I stay
Mhm.
really present? How do I receive what you're saying?
Mhm.
What are in improv, we call them offers that are there beyond just the words?
Mm.
And then the other principle you talk about is just the sort of physical presence, right?
Mhm.
How am I showing up with my body and my voice and using my
Mhm.
instrument?
Yes.
Am I connected and conveying what I want?
Because the body is an instrument. I've been a
It is.
singer as well, all those,
There you go. So,
hitting all those, money notes as they call them. But the body is an instrument. So, and when you mentioned that, those receiving don't you hate it when you're in a conversation and it's the other person won't let you have a moment to even talk? It's they're afraid of the quiet sometimes. It's what's going to happen if you pause. I've really noticed this with my husband talking to my we're celebrating today after this, I record this. We're celebrating his uncle's 94th birthday. And when he's on the phone, he is as sharp as a tack. I hope I'm like that. I just it's pretty amazing. But when he's on the phone, there's all these pauses and then he'll talk. Very, very sharp. But you've got to leave the space. Otherwise, you talk over him the whole time because you think, oh, there can't be any empty space. And I need to do that more sometimes in my relationships, is just not be so forceful. And I think the improv really helps listening, giving it a beat, letting it be. And that's so helpful in business, not just responding right away, but giving it a moment there. So how can improv help us even a little bit more? I think we've really touched on this in
mm,
our own lives, but I know you have some stories of some clients
oh, I
that
do.
you've helped, and it would be really fun to hear a couple of those that you've actually been able to use improv. And I love it, the fact that you went back and got the education, wanting to validate and really be an expert in your field and not just, I would never say that you were just in a theater team or just no, you've graduated from a major, in your drama and in your improv and all of that training. There's a lot of training involved in that, but also with the psychology, understanding how the mind works. So, how does that help some of your clients?
We specialize a lot in the communication skills side of applying improvisation. So that is working with teams, working with leaders. I mentioned before this work we did with a global consulting firm. These are, you know, super smart. Lots of them have accounting backgrounds, kind of strategy stuff.
Mhm.
And they came to us, as I mentioned at the beginning of COVID, and said, "How do we build credibility when we don't have factual answers?"
Wow.
So we worked with them on listening, as we were talking about. How do you really hear from your client what their challenges are and how they're feeling, not just what the facts are, because a
Right.
lot was about holding people's hands. How do you work with them on, we worked with them on storytelling.
Mhm.
How do you articulate or frame or help your client make meaning, both in terms of what is currently existing, but also a vision of what they want to see and where they want to go? We worked with them on presence and
Mm.
status behaviors like power dynamics,
Mhm.
all of those things. And really, what the goal was to be able to have new conversations,
Hmm.
relevant conversations without leaning on subject matter expertise, but
Mhm.
really building trust and connection. And they tell me that we continue to work with them 5 years later. They tell me that that's been really helpful in a mind shift. So that's one example. We've worked with teams also in terms of creativity and innovation, brainstorming, um, idea generation, strategic decision making. And a lot of that is helping people exercise their spontaneity and playfulness muscles. And in the most sort of cliched topic, to think outside of the box, just to think differently and have the courage to come up with bad ideas. One example of that was we worked with a product company that was asked us to just riff on a new charcoal product that they had. And they had gone off the day before and had a whole meeting. They gathered a bunch of people and had real barbecues, and they had real people come and use their product. And then they interviewed them and talked about what you like, what are the challenges. And then they came to us the next day and they said, okay, just improvise. And we spent about an hour just riffing on charcoal and barbecues. And at the end, they were all sort of sitting there looking stunned. And we were like, what's wrong? And they were like, well, you just came up with all of the ideas and insights that our 2-day barbecue $1 million thing did. We could have just had you make it up. So,
That's so funny.
Yeah.
It took them 2 days, and here you had like an hour or two, whatever.
Yeah.
So yeah. It's just the isn't it great to have that when all of us? I like to say, take the box away.
It's brilliant.
Take it away. And let's see, because people that are making big change in their life, and one of the topics today is approaching change, but they're making a big change, and a lot of times there's a box when you're making that change. It feels uncomfortable when you get outside, even that you're close to the edge of that box.
Yeah.
And when we don't just think of being outside the box, but let's just blow the box up a little bit.
Right.
Just,
I have my colleague, Patricia Madsen, Ryan Madsen, who wrote a book called Improv Wisdom as a professor at Stanford. I ran into her once a number of years ago and I said, what are you working on, Patricia? And she said, I'm working with people in thinking inside the box, which I thought was very funny. And what I realized after she said it is, sometimes there's so much inside our box, right?
Yeah.
So much to accept and build with. It's another way of saying I'm just making them see reality and not feeling like they have to be pointlessly original or overly interesting or clever. And so sometimes in improv, we talk about daring to be obvious or daring to be boring. What made me think of that is the whole idea of box. I love what you're saying about throwing the box away, because sometimes what's valuable to us is right here and seems
right
obvious.
there. Yeah.
And sometimes we need to go like, oh, I just need to do something completely differently that I've never tried before. And so I love the idea of like, the box is sort of irrelevant.
Yeah. And part of that is validating your own story.
Yes.
Because I didn't validate my own story for a long time because I thought, well, people won't take me seriously as an artist. I'm expanding to speaking. I need to be more, a certain way now. I have to have all this stuff together. Boy, I tell you what, being an entertainer and an artist for years gives me a huge background.
Huge.
And in fact, technically, I'm not afraid to I'm going to be stuck at the computer for 2 hours trying to figure out some sort of new tech tool. Not that I need to do that, but that's happened so many times that there's an expectation that it's just going to happen again, and not to be afraid of it, and not to just say I'm not good at. No, you have to appreciate that that's part of business, part of life now, more and more. Yes. So there's, you can't. Your story is inside that box too. Is right with you. And then just take away, I always think of those cake boxes, right? They just go down.
Yes.
Yeah, they're down. So now, okay.
Everything's possible. That's beautiful.
Everything's possible. So isn't that fun to kind of visual? I'm a very visual.
I love that. It's a beautiful image.
Yeah, but it is.
Because it seems like a box, but in fact, it's not even a box. It's just a piece of foundation.
Yes.
That if you just unclench it.
Yes.
It's
totally flat, and it makes it so wonderful for serving cake when you're bringing it. here's the platter,
Yeah.
right?
Beautiful.
It's all flat and you can take it. Yeah, but it takes away all of those edges that we think that we have to stay within at certain.
Right.
And I think that's very important in trust, developing trust, in validating our own stories and validating other stories. Everybody has different experiences. And I think it's important with that validation, that you're not discounting where you've come from, and you're not doing that. You're just expanding on it. You're listening. You're open to new areas. So that's very important. We're in the age of AI. Things are going so fast, and I'm working on a new book, and I felt like I needed to do the whole first part in taking away some of the fear of AI, because there's just, oh, it's just moving too fast. Oh, I can't do, you don't need every tool. There's no way you can have every tool anyway, and there's no way you can keep up with the tools. Understand it, take away the fear. And I think that's with our improv and with all of these principles as well, taking away the fear.
Yeah.
So, what a fun conversation. Did you have something else there? And then I want you to really
so many things, but like it's all delicious. It's all delicious.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? This is
Yeah.
a fun conversation. Um, if someone's listening and they want to walk away with at least one thing, like, and they're just listening, they're not, okay, I don't have all my notes by me, I can't, but what is something they can apply almost immediately to help with that principle of improv that would help to navigate that change in their life that really is coming? There's change all the time, right? We go through so many stages. We're not 20 years. I'm not 20 years old anymore. I don't want to go back there, but yeah. But there's every stage of our life is different in the changes that occur. And especially if you're at mid-career, halftime of life by the internet definition usually starts about age 40. I think it's about 45, but it comes fast, really fast. And all of a sudden you're there and you're thinking, do I want to do this the rest of my life, or where do I want to invest my time? Especially when there's these world events happening, when you've got these big fires and you've got all the hurricanes, you've got all of these things happening, and you're thinking, I want to be able to explore some of the things that I've really been passionate about. So those are those changes.
Yeah.
How do you face all of that, with that change? So give us some positive tips people can come away with today.
Yeah. I have another colleague who says improv is loud mindfulness.
Ooh.
Isn't that good?
Yeah.
So being playful, we're out loud, but really what it's about, as I listen to you asking the question, is paying attention and then accepting what is and asking the question, what can I do with this? So that means my internal thoughts and feelings and desires and interests and fears, right?
Mm-hmm.
How do I, first of all, notice them?
Mm-hmm. Right.
And then what do I want to do with that? Asking the question, how do I accept this
Right.
and build with it, as opposed to blocking it or ignoring it or judging it? How do I just go like, oh, I'm not interested in that activity anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Or, oh, I'm really interested in this thing, even though I don't know what to do with it. Or I'm finding this really frustrating and I want help. Like those are all things that we can accept and then create with.
Yeah.
And there are a million ways to do that. One is simple meditation. Another is journaling. Another is finding an improv class.
Right.
Yeah, but that's really it. How can I pay attention to myself and to whatever's going on around me? And then ask the question, how can I accept and build with this?
I love the asking questions too.
Yeah.
Because we ask it of ourselves. We can ask it of others that we trust, and not being afraid to do that. Yeah, that's great. And that's
being afraid and then being like, okay, I'm afraid. That's okay. That's true too, right? Like I don't have to not be afraid to do it.
Yeah. It's part of your story.
Yeah.
It's part of all of our stories, right?
Yeah. We could talk for an hour just on story, by the way, right? It's It's part of improv, but it's also a whole other thing. And so here's some good questions to ask. What stories am I making up about this? Right?
Okay.
What other story might be true? Or what story is that person telling, and how can I hear more, understand more about the story they're making up? How can we co-create together a story?
Right. Great questions, because story is a huge part, and it's a huge part as a writer, as an improver. It's huge. It's very important to understand the different parts of that, and consistently in our lives, and not to discount our own story as well. And
Amen.
we don't have to stay. If we've been a victim, we don't have to stay there. We can put the walls down of that box and create and keep going. That's part of your story, but that's, it's time to move on. Time to move on. So, well, how can people find out more about you? I want you to say this. This will all be in the show notes, by the way, but all of your information. So how can they contact you or find out more about you?
So our applied improv company is Koppett. That's my last name, KOPPETT.com. And there are all sorts of links there. They can link to a couple of books I've written. One is explicitly on applied improv. The other is called The Facilitation Advantage, which doesn't really mention improv very much, but it's all improv, about how leaders can use the superpower of facilitation to be more effective. And those are the main things. You can sign up for a newsletter. There's YouTube channel, all that. But if you go there, you find me on LinkedIn. But if you go to Koppett.com, you'll find all that stuff. If you're in the upstate New York area, you can come by the Mopco Improv Theater any Saturday night and see some shows, or come to our drop-in classes on Monday night.
How fun. How fun. I haven't been to New York in a little while. I used to go back there almost every year for arts conferences and producing showcases. But I have definite friends I connect with often there too. So yeah, Zoom's
come on by anytime.
Yes, yeah.
We have a full-length improv musical called Spontaneous Broadway that we do. So
wow, how fun! See, it's a fun time of life, isn't it? It's great.
It is.
Well, thank you so much, Kat, for being with us today, and thank you all for listening. And make sure you do get our newsletters as well, because you'll get every single podcast. And I have several guests a month now. I used to just have one guest a month, but now I have usually about 3 by the time I add in. I've added all these bonuses, and then I speak a couple times. My husband's on once. You'll always want to see him. He's a fun guy with a big background. So make sure that you tune in there. And our Halftime Success, that's also our affiliate site. So we have a lot of those. I carry a lot of things from our guests too, to help them promote. So I feel like that's an important mission, because there's a lot of independents out there, and I've been one for years. So thank you again, Kat, for joining us today. And thank you, all of you, for staying with us this whole time. And I'll look forward to being with you all again next time. So bye-bye for now. Thank you for joining us. It is because of our wonderful listeners like you that we keep going strong week after week. We'd love it if you'd share and follow us to not miss a single show, and even write a review. You can also find all of our articles, products, and links at womenathalftime.com.